friends, this is Vicki Binger. Welcome during this holiday season to the December CAC2 all-member webinar. I appreciate you giving up time in your busy schedules for this fantastic presentation that we have coming to you from Europe. We always begin our webinars with a little bit of housekeeping. I'd like to point out to the attendees that they have a control panel that they are able to interact with. Right now, everyone is on mute that are attendees, so that we make sure that background noise is kept to a minimum. At later time, you'll be able to ask questions using that control panel by typing them into that bar. If your question is too complex to type in, then at the end of the presentation, I'll let you raise your virtual hand and we'll open your mic to ask a more complicated question if need be. We have a variety of things going on this holiday season, and I'd like to point out that we've been monitoring the drug shortage crisis that came around vincristine and looking at various legislative options. I want to thank the community and our CAC2 members for rallying together in a very evidence-based way to try to make sure that vincristine shipments were resumed back in October, and we are now trying to make sure that these kinds of issues along the supply chain don't happen. And when we do have activities, days of action, or just legislation around that, possibly in support of the MEDS Act or other legislation that's coming up, we will let you know about that. We are supported today at the webinar by our technology team, ably staffed by Robin French of the Morgan Adams Foundation, Joanne Salcido of the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, and our technology gurus, Scott Gilman. Thanks to them, without the volunteer support of all of our member organizations, and we would not be able to do the many things that we're doing. Robin, if you would like to yes, thank you. We begin every meeting by reiterating the CAC2 values, and primarily that we put the children with cancer and their families first in everything that we do. And we work really hard to be collaborative and inclusive and cost effective and really give voice to the community in a coordinated fashion. It is my pleasure today to introduce our webinar liaison, Susan Weiner. Susan is a veteran of national childhood cancer advocacy issues. She's the founder of Children's Cancer Cause, which marked its 20-year anniversary this year. Susan is not only an amazing advocate and policy expert, but also a dear friend of mine and one of the founding members of CAC2. Susan trained and worked as an academic research cognitive psychologist before losing her son Adam to a brain tumor 13 years after his diagnosis. Susan is here with us. She's been essential in setting this webinar up and will introduce our speaker for us.
Thank you, Vicki. And thank you to CAC2 for having this webinar today. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Gilles Vassal today. Dr. Vassal is a pediatric oncologist with a PhD in pharmacology. He's a professor of oncology at the University of Paris, and head of the clinical research division at Gustave Roussy, a large comprehensive cancer center in France. For the past 20 years, Dr. Vassal has dedicated his research, clinical and training activities to the development of new drugs for children and adolescents with cancer, our kids. He is a preeminent pediatric oncologist in Europe, serving as the president of the European Pediatric Professional Society and Research Cooperative Group. I will spare you the acronyms for these organizations on this call. Dr. Vassal is the founder and chair of Accelerate, a new international approach to accelerating innovative anti-cancer therapy. Welcome, Dr. Vassal, and we are eager to hear your presentation today.
Thank you, Susan, for this very kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm talking from Paris, and I'm moving my screen for you to, yes. I hope you can see my screen at the moment. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you where we are and how we want to really accelerate drug development and development of innovation for children and adolescents with cancer. What I would like to address today is first where we are at the moment in terms of pediatric oncology drug development, the current situation, and why international collaboration is so essential. Then I will address what is going on at the moment, the rapidly emerging way of changing the way we are doing things, new science, and also the new regulation that you have been all really working on. And finally, I will address the Accelerate initiative that Susan presented, just to show you that working together can really make a difference for the way we are doing new drug development for children with cancer. So where are we? At the moment, you all know there is a large number of drugs being evaluated in adults. And clearly, over the last 20 years, brand new drugs have been approved for the treatment of adults with cancer where no treatment was available. Over the last 20 years, there has been regulation in Europe and in the US really to incentivize the development of medicines for children. And in the field of oncology, it has been a change in the landscape, but it did not address yet the real needs of the children. And one of the reasons was and is that the pediatric development of this medicine has been based on the adult indication rather than on the science and understanding of the biology of the pediatric tumors. And the consequences were that first, many drugs have been waived in development by the way that it was not medically and scientifically justified to waive these developments in children. We clearly saw significant delays in starting the development of this innovative medicine for children. And at the end, very few new anti-cancer medicine have been approved over the last 10 years for children with cancer. And I counted about 10 medicines approved in the US and in Europe for the treatment of pediatric malignancies, mainly leukemias. As an example, the crizotinib is illustrating the issue of wrong decision to waive development. As you know, crizotinib is a targeted medicine with 3 targets, ALK, ROS1, and MET. It was first approved in the US in 2011, in Europe in 2012 for the treatment of adults with ALK-positive lung cancer, meaning the tumor were positive for the biomarker ALK, the target of the compound. But both in the US and Europe, the pediatric development was waived. Under PRIA, there was an exemption because the drug had an orphan drug design. And in Europe, there was a waiver because lung cancer is not occurring in children. While we did have already at that time scientific evidence that ALK is an important oncogenic driver in lymphoma, such as anaplastic large cell lymphoma, in sarcoma, such as inflammatory myofibroblastic tumors, and in neuroblastoma. Because there was no development by the company, the academic development was started by the COG with the first phase 1 in children of crizotinib, followed by expansion in children with the ALCL and IMT, clearly showing that this drug is active in lymphoma in adults and in children and in sarcomas. And as of today, the drug is still not approved for the treatment of pediatric malignancies, neither in Europe nor in the US. And the drug is either used off-label by physicians, or children don't have access to this medicine, where we know that it can provide benefit and can really help children with those diseases. The other issue is the delay in starting development of pediatric plans. This is the illustration of the first two checkpoint inhibitors, the two immunotherapy, nivolumab and pembrolizumab. And it shows you in yellow the timelines for the development in adults from the phase 1 to the marketing authorization, the black rounds on the screen, which were the marketing authorization in the US. And as you can see, both drugs were approved in 2014 by the FDA and a year later by the European Medicines Agency. But this slide showed you that the start of the pediatric trials was only after first approval in adults in the US, while it should have been earlier, not to waste time in knowing whether these drugs would be effective or not in children. This illustrates the delay in starting the development of pediatric medicine with regard to the start of the development in adults. And this was confirmed by a paper published by Stéphane Dubois, who looked at the 126 oncology products that have been approved by FDA from 1997 to 2017. And it showed that the median time between the first trial in adults and the first trial in children was 6.5 years, clearly illustrating in this survey that the start of pediatric development of these innovative anti-cancer medicine has been delayed. And this is why we say there is a need to accelerate the development of innovative medicines. And the goal is first to base the development of innovative compound on the science, not on the fact that a drug is developed in adult cancer, such as lung, and should not be developed in children because lung does not exist in children. But the drug development, the way we identify medicine that should be evaluated in children, is based on science, on knowledge of the biology of the tumor occurring in children, in order to really meet the needs of the patient. And because there are 1,000 drugs and we cannot explore all the drugs, this is the way to prioritize, to identify through science what are the molecules that are probably the best one to be considered for drug development. Which means that the goal, and this is where all the community is at the moment, is A, to accelerate, and B, to prioritize through science in order to meet children and adolescents' needs. The second thing I wanted to share with you is clearly the science and the research is really moving forward with completely new approaches that will help accelerating the development of innovative medicine for children. First of all, we know better pediatric cancer. This slide illustrates that medulloblastoma is no longer one disease, but at least several different diseases, as defined by the molecular analysis, the histological analysis, and the probability of effectiveness of the treatment. So we know better the biology of pediatric malignancies that should serve the way we develop innovative medicine for this disease. The second thing that over the last years, around the world, there have been programs to generate molecular information on the tumor of children and adolescents with cancer in order to identify if there would be any target that would be the rationale to provide evaluation of a targeted agent for the children. And this slide is just summarizing what was presented last September at the pediatric AACR meeting, reporting the program in Australia, ZERO, the program in Germany, INFORM, in France, MAPIAX, and in the US, GAIN, and many other programs, really generating, at the time of the tumor, is evaluating molecular information to help making decision and proposal for children. And in addition, the development of liquid biopsies will facilitate generating this information for children who need innovative therapies. And this is the next step, which is we are generating a lot of data. We need to make them findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable to be sure that these data will be used by the researchers to better understand the disease that children are suffering from and to generate new knowledge, new target for new therapies. In addition, over the last year, there have been two major preclinical testing platform and program that have been set up and running. The National Cancer Institute Preclinical Pediatric Testing Consortium, the PPTC, is up and running, evaluating new compounds at the preclinical level on relevant preclinical pediatric models. In Europe, we do have the ITCCP4 program, which is a public-private partnership supported by the European Union, where academia, pharmaceutical industry, and CRO are developing a new platform with new pediatric models to be able to evaluate at the preclinical level the drugs that should be developed then in children. So clearly, preclinical testing is now feasible and available to introduce in the global strategy. And finally, we develop master protocols to offer new efficiencies to evaluate therapy. And this is the pediatric match running in the US by the COG that I'm sure you all know. And in Europe, we do have the AXE eSmart, which is also a master protocol. Why these master protocols are so important? It's a way to enlarge the panel of innovative medicine that are proposed to children. And it's also an instrument to more rapidly open new therapeutic arms and introduce in this setting new investigating medicines to be evaluated. So clearly this is a tool for accelerating as well new drug development for children with cancer. It's not only science, it's not only what in the community, the scientists, the clinicians have been set up, but also the environment, which is clearly at the moment making things more favorable. You all know that since 1997, with the Best Pharmaceutical for Children Act, there have been several pieces of regulation in the US, in Europe, really changing the landscape of evaluation of medicine in children and incentivizing the companies to develop their compound in children. This was the BPCA, the Pediatric Research Equity Act, and since 2006, the pediatric regulation in Europe. This regulation has been very important for many specialties in pediatrics, for rheumatology, for infectious disease. But in the field of pediatric oncology, we have been facing with some issues because these regulations are based on the relevance of the adult disease for being developed in children with the same disease. So to be clear, pediatric regulations are driven by drugs application to adult cancer and not by its relevance to childhood cancers. But since 2010, there have been two new pieces of regulation that are really changing the landscape. In 2010, the Creating Hope, really incentivizing to first submit a new medicine in children. And in 2017, the Race for Children Act, which is now putting in the regulatory landscape the science-driven approach. I know that you have been all really active to make this act pass, and I would like to show you that it will really change the landscape and help us to accelerate and prioritize the medicine that we develop for children. You know that the Rest for Children Act was a FDA Reauthorization Act enacted in August 18, 2017, that clearly mandates the development of pediatric clinical trials for anti-cancer medicines that are directed at a molecular target substantially relevant to the growth or progression of a pediatric cancer. And in addition, it suppress the exemption of orphan drug design medicines. And this is important because it says we should look at the biology of the tumor. We should look at what we know of the pediatric malignancy to decide whether or not a medicine should be developed in children. Which means that if we take again the example that I took at the beginning, crizotinib, what would happen in 2020 if crizotinib were the brand new drug as a first in class among all ALK inhibitors? Under the RACE Act, there would be a requirement to study this medicine in ALK positive malignancies, even though lung cancer does not exist in children. And this would start not after the first marketing authorization in adults, but this would start during the phase 2 trials in adults. That would mean that the efficacy in anaplastic large cell lymphoma and in sarcomas would be known before the filing in adults, increasing the likelihood that this drug would be approved and then accessible for children. So this is an illustration on how the Rest for Children Act can really is providing the regulatory landscape to decide on the development of a medicine based on science and not on the adult conditions. And this is exactly what Peter Adamson and I anticipated in 2013, where we published in Lancet Oncology this paper calling for novel development pathways. And these figures show the classical development in adult of any drug, any anti-cancer drug. First, preclinical testing to identify the drug to move forward, then phase 1 in adults, phase 2, phase 3, and marketing authorization. And in 2013, we said, during the preclinical evaluation and the first evaluation in adults, the phase 1, this is a time to generate information on the relevance of the target and to generate preclinical data to define whether or not this molecule might be relevant to treat pediatric malignancies. And this would provide, at the end of the phase 1, or as expected in Europe with the pediatric regulation, or at the end of the phase 2, as expected in the US by the PRIA, that to answer the question, yes or no, is this drug relevant? And this would be a way really to identify early whether a drug should be developed in children, yes or no, and thus squeeze time in starting the development of pediatric trials. While in addition, it will help define the right drug to be developed and not to waive drug because the disease in adults does not exist in children. So in this setting, why did we create the Accelerate initiative, which is a quite new and innovative approach with a very strong principle, all representative of all stakeholders must be engaged, meaning, of course, the academia, industry, regulatory bodies, and parents and patients advocates. And I would like to show you what it is about, what we are doing, and to share with you that we are starting to change the mindset and to change the way things are being done in the development of innovative medicine for children. So it's very early in Berlin in 2008 where I made this presentation and said, you know what? Developing new medicine for children with cancer is brand new for everyone. Clinicians never did development in such a way that it can, at the end, become an approved drug. Regulatory bodies have no knowledge about how to evaluate medicine in children, and pharma don't do that as well. Well, the parents are really willing for this to happen and really for this to happen fast. And it was recognized at the beginning that the only way forward for all these people was to work together on a learning curve, and in order to define that clearly we need to do in the pediatric oncology field probably differently as compared to what's happening in the adult oncology field. And this was the reason why we created the Accelerate platform, which is an international multi-stakeholder organization created in 2015 with the goal of improving new drug development for children and adolescents with cancer. And you can see on the slide it is really an international organization. It has been quite a journey to set up the capacity to work together. And this is illustrated on this slide. We started in 2011 in London as part of a European project called ENCA, where for the first time in the same room, we had people from the regulatory bodies, industry, academia, and parents. And clearly we said, where are we and where do we want to go? And at that time, it was obvious that all these people did not know how to work together. But then we made several meetings. We started to figure out how to work together. And we created in 2015 in Vienna the Accelerate platform. And this is in a publication that you can look at, clearly demonstrating or showing what are the needs and what would do such a platform. Then the platform turned into international in 2018 and was incorporated as a non-for-profit organization this year. Accelerate is about all stakeholders, and I just show you the picture of the steering committee. As you can see, there are 4 representatives from academia, 4 representatives from industry, 4 representatives from advocacy, and 4 representatives from regulatory bodies. Clearly, a balanced participation of all stakeholders to steer the activity of the Accelerate platform. So what are we doing? We first have the annual conference where we share where we are, where we brainstorm, and where we identify issues. Because Accelerate is about solving issues. And from these issues and topics, we generate working groups to deliver solutions. And from the very beginning, one of the issues was really to implement the mechanism of action / target-based development and to prioritize. And this is why we created the Pediatric Strategy Forums, which is an asset of Accelerate in the field to prioritize and accelerate new drug development for children. The key point is collaboration, and we have a motto: no blame, no shame. We look at what's happened in the past. We do not blame anyone of what was decided, but we look at the data and we propose solutions together. The working groups are there to find solutions. The very first working group was on new strategy for development of oncology drugs, how to anticipate science rather than the adult indication-driven approach. And this is where the concept of Pediatric Strategy Forum was generated. We then had a group on new business models, how new companies can really address differently drug development for children. We had a working group on new incentive, and clearly we identified that incentive was not at that time an opportunity because there was no change in regulation. And then we do have still ongoing 4 working groups. The FAIR Trials Group, Fostering Age-Inclusive Research, is really working on awareness and making sure that adolescents can participate to adult trials when it is medically and scientifically relevant. We have an ongoing working group on fit for filing to be sure, and when academia is developing a drug, it is generating data that can be used for the purpose, the purpose of the regulation, the purpose of the company, really to submit their data. We have a group working on long-term follow-up and a group on international cooperation. All these groups are formed of representatives from all stakeholders. Just an illustration, I would like just to share with you this very first initiative on new strategy that we had at the beginning. And it came up with a paper saying this is a rationale and a need to implement mechanism of action, biology-driven early drug development for children with cancer. And if you look at the authors on the left-hand side, they are from academia, from industry, there are parents, and they are from regulatory bodies. The conclusion was prioritization among the 1,000 compounds should be based on the mechanism of action / target, on the needs of the patient, and on the feasibility. And to do that, we need to use stronger biological data and preclinical data. And this is where the concept of pediatric strategy forums was generating. Pediatric Strategy Forum that we are developing, accelerate developing in partnership with the European Medicine Agency and the Food and Drug Administration. So what is a forum? It's a unique initiative in pediatric oncology drug development. It never happened before. All stakeholders are there focusing on solving a specific clinical dilemma that have been identified. Clinicians and researchers with their expertise, companies presenting their data on relevant drugs, parents expressing families' priorities and practicalities, and regulators from both sides of the Atlantic who then assimilate all these priorities from academia, industry, and parents. The model is the following up. The goal is to inform on pediatric development strategies and decisions by sharing information from all stakeholders and learning from each other. At the end of the forum, everyone has the same understanding of the issue, of what is needed, where we develop at the same time the strategy. And the goal is to reach a consensus that will facilitate prioritization of treatment strategy later on. So we do not decide in the forum, but we share the information and we build the strategy to facilitate prioritization after the forums. All stakeholders are participating. The classical content, we review the biology of the disease, we look at the therapeutic needs, and we look at the compounds from the non-clinical and clinical data. There are 2 days meeting on invitation after expression of interest, and the output of such forum are concrete. First, we publish the result and the summary. Second, we make recommendation for prioritization of medicinal products that are used, this recommendation, by both regulatory agencies and pharmaceutical industry. When needed, we create new initiatives, for example, platform trials to accelerate drug evaluation. And of course, we monitor changes in the regulatory submissions. And clearly, at the moment, we see the impact of these forums on the decision about compounds to be developed or not in children, both in Europe and in the US. Today, we have done 4 forums focusing either on a disease or on a class of compound. The first one addressed ALK inhibition, and you see it was at EMA, and we discussed 6 products from 5 companies. The second one was mature B-cell malignancies in children. We had 14 companies and 20 products. It was in 2017. In September 2018, we addressed a very busy field, checkpoint inhibitors, immunotherapy, and to look at how to develop combination in pediatric malignancies. And last April in Rotterdam, we addressed a disease, acute myeloid leukemia, where there are many drugs developed in adults and clearly a need in children that were not well addressed so far. And as you see, we discussed 26 products from 18 companies. What I would like to do in the next slide is just to explain more in detail how such a forum is being set up and how it can really address the dilemma and the issue identified. This was the second forum on mature B-cell malignancies in children in November 2017. On the left-hand side, this is the rationale. Clearly, there are highly effective current therapy for children with high-risk mature B-cell malignancies with an event-free survival of about 95%, but there is no salvage therapy at all in relapse. And what we know from this treatment, there are really an important acute toxicity, but most of the survivors don't have or long-term toxicity or mild long-term toxicity. So clearly, the unmet therapeutic needs were A, the need to develop innovative treatment for patients remaining incurable without any treatment to be proposed at the moment in relapse, and reducing high acute toxicity of current therapy. At the meantime, there are many drugs being developed in adults with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. It is a very active field. At the same time, children with relapsed lymphoma do not have access or have a poor access to innovative therapies. And these were the issues. A need for few patients, but real need not well addressed, where at the same time, there are many drugs developed by companies and regulatory people asking for most of these drugs to develop pediatric plans that are not feasible. So the meeting was held in 2017 in London. There were 73 participants from both Europe and North America. There were parents representatives from Europe and the US. There were regulatory bodies, not only from EMA, but also from FDA. We had 15 pharma and 20 medicinal products being discussed. What were the outcomes of this forum? It was published in 2019 in the European Journal of Cancer. And again, this is authored by academia, industry, advocacy, and regulatory bodies. The main conclusions were, first, these malignancies, B-cell malignancies, are different in children and adults. To set up a successful de-escalation to decrease the acute toxicity that children are experiencing with frontline treatment, we need to have an effective salvage therapy. And the priority is then to develop treatment at relapse, considering that it's a very small number of patients, we need a global strategy. And of course, we will privilege combination therapy rather than monotherapy. During the meeting, the clinicians set up priorities among all the drugs, the type of drugs and mechanism of action of these drugs to be addressed and considered for this disease. And it was defined that A, antibody drug conjugates, B, CAR T cells, not frontline, but at the time of consolidation, and B, T-cell engager were the three classes of compound that should be prioritized, and deprioritize any chemotherapy that were unlikely to really provide new evidence of efficacy for these children. The output is further publication, seen on the left-hand side. We are developing an international platform for children with relapsed non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and this is in development because there was a need to set up such a master protocol to provide access to a large number of therapies in a way that they are selected, and not only for children in Europe, but for children in the US. And we are developing at the moment this program with the COG. And in addition, there has been pediatric investigation plans that were approved for compounds that were considered not relevant for children that turned into a waiver because it was identified that there was no need for this compound. So there was an impact on the landscape and the portfolio of pediatric investigation plan, showing that a forum, first of all, share and make a consensus on a topic in terms of strategy for development of innovative medicine and prioritization. builds new assets such as platform trial to deliver on accelerating innovative medicine for children, but also impact the interaction between pharma and regulatory bodies in such a way that the pediatric study plan and the pediatric investigation plan that are approved meet the strategy and the right drugs are being developed. So where are we going with the Pediatric Strategy Forum? We decided in 2019 that we would do alternatively a forum in Europe and in the US, and we would do 2 per year. The next one will be in the US. It will be the first in the US on epigenetic modifiers, and the topic of the next one will be decided in February. And the Pediatric Forum number 5, first in US, will be on the development of epigenetic modifiers in children, a brand new class of compound, which is rather early in terms of is it relevant for children. When we look at ALK inhibitors, there were already a lot of data, including phase 1 trial in children. Here we are very early, and this is the interest of this new forum to look early at a class of compound to figure out how things can be done and prioritize. This will be an opportunity to disseminate understanding about the Pediatric Strategy Forum model, to coordinate international approaches to specific targets and diseases, and also to better design the landscape for regulatory decision for this class of compound. And this is supported by Alex Lemonade-Stand, and we thank very much Alex Lemonade-Stand for really supporting this first Pediatric Strategy Forum in the US. So I am at the end of this presentation. In conclusion of this, and I'm sorry if I was long, but I wanted really to share with you that yes, it is now in our hand to accelerate and prioritize the development of innovative compounds for children and adolescents with cancer. Yes, it is feasible to have people in the room from industry, from regulatory bodies, from academia, with parents, discussing how to make things change. And clearly, I hope I convince you that we can really move the needle and really improve the way we propose innovative treatment for children and adolescents with cancer. Without this, I will finish. I would just to invite you to the next Accelerate conference. It will be the number 8. It will be in Brussels in February, where clearly all stakeholders are discussing the progress we make, identifying new issues, and really build the way we change the landscape and how things are being developed for this new medicine for children with cancer. I would like to thank you very much, everyone, for your attention. Thank you.
Gilles, that was an amazing summary of what I know is a very complex topic. I've been watching, and I've actually had the good fortune to attend one of the conference meetings, and the spirit of collaboration in the room is always just amazing. And for this particular group of folks who actually, commit to collaborative models by actually paying money for their membership, I think this is amazing. I would like to remind everybody that we have the opportunity to ask questions. We've got about 15 minutes, and Gilles has given us his time today. I do know that we have a question from Oscar Ortiz, who is one of our members from Sebastian Strong down in Florida, and he asked, I think it's something that is on everybody's mind, and that is the presentation going to be shared with the attendees? We will process the video of this. It is being recorded, and we will post it to the CAC2 website. I might have to defer to our technology team about whether the recording actually goes out immediately to the attendees, or whether that you'll have to get it from us, but certainly it will be available for you to watch again. I know it was a very dense conversation, and so Oscar goes on to point out that this is extremely helpful, and having the presentation to share with boards of directors and other important leadership in the various foundations would be important. So I would tend to agree with that. And so if you want to type your question in or raise your virtual hand for any additional questions, I wonder, Gilles, while we're waiting for the audience to post in their questions, how is Accelerate financed? Does it accept financial support from sponsors, from industry? How are you making it? We know that the whole collaborative thing is expensive, and that there's not a huge amount of money just floating around to do this sort of thing.
So thank you, Vicky, for this question, which is an important question. The initiation of the program was embedded in the European project that I was mentioning called ENCA. And the way Accelerate is funding, that it cannot accept direct funding from pharma. Why? Because it's a condition for participation of regulatory bodies, especially representative from the European Medicine Agency. So we do not have, and we cannot have, direct funding from pharma, which makes the discussion completely different. And really having the regulatory bodies in part of this is extremely important. So we rely on public funding. We do have some support from the European Society of Pediatric Oncology, and we do have some grants from non-profit organization. So clearly the funding of Accelerate is not by industry for the reason I mentioned.
Super. So we have another question from a longtime and dear friend of yours, Donna Ludwinski of Solving Kids Cancer, and would just like you to speak a little bit on the whole idea about getting companies to participate, particularly in the strategy forum, where it looks like there's a mandate to share data. Is this something that companies have been embracing or avoiding, or what is your sense there?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is important. We said, first of all, the principle is that we send a call for expression of interest. So any company on a given topic can say, I would like to come and I would like to share. Participation to a forum is on invitation only. And what we ask company is that you are invited, but you will share data. Because we do not want to be in a situation that there would be company listening and not sharing. This is why it's on invitation, and this is why we ask company to share data. And I can tell you the very first meeting, the meeting on ALK inhibition, that was a brand new experience for everyone. And clearly companies were really fear that there would be regulatory decision during the meeting. And we said, no regulatory decision. We said, you are not asked to share confidential data, only public data. And this is already extremely important because all public data is shared at the same time with everyone. So clearly the first meeting, people were really reluctant, but they came. Then they found that the momentum in the meeting was such that it could be feasible, and it was feasible to discuss. And now we do have, and you saw the number of pharma that are participating. They are really, really keen to participate. There are still some companies who said, no, I would not like to share some data. And then we say, well, by this way, you cannot participate.
Okay, well, that is very reassuring, and I appreciate that answer. I think what's really on the minds of a number of people is it has to do with going from this drug development into clinical trials. Do you have thoughts on how international trials can be just more closely organized in like a cooperative group setting? Do you have a thought process about how Accelerate can help that stage of the process?
Yes, indeed, this is extremely important because if we want to accelerate, we need to work together globally. And as I showed you with the strategy forum on mature B-cell lymphoma, clearly the decision was to make a platform trial, which is in development and will be run in Europe and in the US. The recent forum on acute myeloid leukemia was very informative and very successful. We invited Andy Kolb from the COG AML and sharing the PEDAL project, which is an important initiative with the Lymphoma Leukemia Society. And it was decided during the meeting that, yes, this should be expanded to Europe. And there is ongoing discussion for European teams to participate to this initiative. So yes, Accelerate is providing the landscape for people to say we need to work together and build clinical trials across Atlantic, really to make sure that more children have access to innovative compound and we will more rapidly generate the data we need.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Gilles, everybody's very engaged. I have another question here, and it says, are there efforts to somehow integrate or engage funders like the many people that are on this call and the many more that will be watching on video once it's posted because they can't get away from their day jobs in the middle of the day, to engage them through Accelerate in ways to help, to coordinate or to share research funding strategies or priorities, or how are you working on in integrating, and is this open to American funders, or are you still really just coordinating those opportunities in Europe?
Yes, thank you for the question. This is clearly a project which is in development, and Susan, who is a member of the steering committee, is kindly helping us in developing such a funding strategy, really to make this sustainable. I have to share with you that at the moment, Accelerate is a little bit fragile because it is not sustainable, where clearly we have ambition and clearly we show that we can deliver. So clearly, having support from groups and also participation is extremely important for us. I showed you that from the beginning, parents are on board, contributing, making important steps forward, reassuring that the patients are and should be at the center of what we do. And clearly, the support, financial support, will be very important to make this sustainable on the long term.
Gilles, thank you. I'm going to pause for just a moment to see if we have any final follow-up questions. I know that we have had a very attentive group, and that you might have questions after the presentation ends, and we'll try to facilitate getting answers to those. But if there are no more questions, I would like to just extend my thanks, Gilles, to you both collectively on behalf of CAC2 and CAC2's leadership, that you've given your time today to bring us up to speed on this, and then more personally the opportunity that I've had and will continue to have moving into the future to be involved in this initiative. I believe that Susan has some final closing remarks that she would like to address to the audience and to you. So Susan, if you would like to unmute yourself and sort of be a closer for us, then we will shut down and wish everybody a happy holidays as they go through the rest of this month.
Thank you, Vicky.
So if I may, Vicky, before Susan is just a short word. First of all, I can answer any question, so please circulate my email. If people want to send me a message, I will be very pleased to answer. I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity. It has been really great, and clearly we are looking forward to making this even more effective than it is at the moment. Sorry, Susan, for interrupting you.
Always welcome. Of course, the thanks I have personal thanks for everyone, and to Vicky and to Gilles for an absolutely fascinating presentation. And in the 20 years that I've been working on this problem, this is really a refreshing and innovative approach to getting the key stakeholders responsible for developing new therapies for our kids to move faster and to be science-based, to make the decisions science-based. We're particularly excited that the pediatric strategy forums will alternate, of course, in the US and in Europe. And the one occurring in January, the first US pediatric strategy forum, is especially exciting. And we're grateful, and we've had the generous support of Alex's Lemonade Stand for providing major support for this first forum, and to others for providing additional support to fill the gap, which still persists in the forum that we are trying to manage. After all, Accelerated is a newly formed nonprofit. So if anybody has any additional questions about Accelerate, about its activities, about its funding, about how to help, please feel free to contact me. And we will, we were working all of these details out. The opportunities, the landscape for how our kids are being treated now and in the future is really opportune. So please contact me at slwiener@childrenscause.org. And if I can't answer your questions, I'll be happy to direct you to another source. Thank you, Gil, and thank you, everyone, for your participation today. It's an exciting moment.
All right. Well, this is it. We're going to stop the webinar now, and we'll look for emails. We do also send a survey out immediately following this. If it helps us get better, and if you could just provide your feedback when you get the survey, I'd really appreciate it. And Joanne, Robin, Scott, thank you for driving this technology. And Jill, I look forward to seeing you next month. Oh,
see you next month. Thank you.
So I just got an email. Is there a URL for Accelerate? Is there a way to look up on the internet to read about Accelerate and the strategy forums and the working groups? And
Sure.
If it's too hard to remember, then I can send it out in an email. But how can people find this on the internet?
Yeah, so there is a website. The website is accelerate-platform.eu. And if you put on the website Accelerate Platform, you will go directly to the website. And we are finalizing the communication document, because we said we need really to have document to better communicate. And this will be ready before Christmas, and we will be sending you, Vicky, for all the participants for having additional information on Accelerate.
Super. And Andrea, who is part of the Accelerate team, just sent me the URL through the message board, which I have put into the message box in the chat that should have gone out to everyone. So it is, to repeat, www.accelerate-platform.org. And you should be able to find it there. And as Gilles just mentioned, there will be a one-pager description available sometime before the end of the year. Well, that was a good hour, well used. Thank you again, and everyone have safe and peaceful holidays.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Sheila.
Bye.